Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. For today's tutorial, we take inspo from the Far East and make the coolest modern mock neck top, fit for any modern crochet warrior princess. Speaking of, by now y'all know the drill, but in case you're new, the best easy to follow modern crochet tutorials and patterns are here with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 305 grams of yarn. That's 685 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you see more sunrises or sunsets during your week. I see more sunsets, but the sunrises are always my fave. We're using 3 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and half double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making a chain that starts 1 inch underneath our underarm down to our waist. Now I need roughly 7 inches or 18 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 30. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to do a half double crochet row. Start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 2. Now the chain 2 doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. From here we're going to yarn over, preparing for a half double, into that chain that we blocked off or the 3rd chain from our hook, insert with a half double crochet. So insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3, once more, yarn over, into that next chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. Continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. We've made our way down with our half double crochets, leaving that last one. Now into that last one, we're all going to do an increase. So yarn over, into that last chain with 1 half double crochet, then into that same last chain with a 2nd half double crochet. Now our row 1 is complete. We should have 1 more stitch, then chains that we made. Now our following row is going to be a slip stitch row within the back loops. So chain 1, flip our work. Working into that last stitch from our previous row, into that back loop, we're going to insert, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook. We're going to do that again. Into that next stitch's back loop, yarn over, and gently pull through everything. From here, we're going to continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and we do want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. We are back. Our first 2 rows are completed. Now it's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows, all within the back loops. So let's get started on a row 3 together. We're all going to chain 2 and flip. Finding that last stitch from our previous row, we're going to yarn over, insert into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us with 1 back loop half double. Then from here, continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one, and I'll meet you back to increase together once more. We've made our way down with our row 3, leaving that last stitch. Now we're going to close off the row with an increase of 2 back loop half doubles, so into that last stitch's back loop with 1, into that same back loop with a 2nd half double crochet. Now from here we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows. So our following row we're going to chain 1 flip our work and put 1 back loop slip into every stitch. Then like I said, continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we have a portion that can stretch, because remember it does have a decent amount of stretch to it, from mid underarm over to the corner of our underarm. Then I will meet you guys back right after a slip stitch row, so along the bottom, then we can complete our underarm together from there. So we are back. The first portion of my underarm is complete. I have a total of 4 rows. This width is just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, we're going to do the rest of our underarm portion to get a really smooth curve that leads up to our shoulder. So get started on the following half double crochet row. We're going to chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving that last stitch, and I'll meet you back to do that increase together as well. So we made our way down with our half double crochet row, and now we're going to do an increase of 3 back loop half doubles. So yarn over into that last stitch's back loop with 1 back loop half, a second back loop half, and a third back loop half double crochet. Now that that increase is completed, our following row is going to be another slip stitch row, but also with an increase. So how we're going to do that one is start with a chain 2. That first chain is going to count as a stitch for the following row. That second chain is going to be our turning chain, and we're going to flip our work. So into that second chain that we made, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. So we're going to skip that first, into that second chain, into that back loop with a slip, then continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now from here, we're going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows. So it's a back loop half double crochet row that ends on an increase of 3 half doubles, then a back loop slip stitch row that starts with an increase as well, until we now have a portion that can stretch from mid underarm over to the front of our body, so roughly where a tank top strap or a bra strap would lay. Then I'll meet everyone back right after a half double crochet row, so that is along the top. Then we can get started on the height of the shoulder together from there. So we are back. We have just completed the entirety of our underarm. I have a total of 7 rows now. My width is roughly 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters, still unstretched. Now from here, since we all should have ended along the top, we're now going to make a chain that reaches the top of our shoulder. Now, we want to make sure that when we're putting this up to ourselves, our tail end is still staying 1 inch underneath our underarm so that our armhole doesn't become too tight or too loose. Then we're going to make our chain. I've already figured out my chain. I need roughly 4 inches or 10 centimeters. So I went ahead and made a chain 20. Then we're going to do the following row in our row sequence, which is a slip stitch row. So start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch. That's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to start with a slip stitch. So we're going to insert, yarn over, gently pull through everything. And from here, we're just going to slip stitch into every chain. Once we reach the body, 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, then I'll meet you back. We are back and our first shoulder row is complete. Now for the shoulder portion, we're going to be doing back loop half and back loop slip stitch rows, no increases, no decreases. So from where we're at, chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half into every stitch, then the following row, chain 2, flip our work, 1 back loop slip into every stitch. Continue to repeat those 2 previous rows with no increases and no decreases until we have a portion that can now stretch over, still from mid underarm, over to the side of the base of our neck. Then I will meet you guys back right after a slip stitch row, so along the bottom, then we can get started on the neckline together from there. We are back. My shoulder portion is complete. I have a total of 14 rows. My width is just about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to get started on our neckline. So what we're all going to want to do is put this up to ourselves, making sure the top of the shoulder detail is sitting on top of our shoulder. Then we're going to insert a stitch marker into the stitch that we have that's nearest to the base of our neck. So I inserted my stitch marker into the 10th stitch from the top. That's just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters. Now from here, do the following row, which is 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch until we're worked into the stitch right before our stitch marker. So our first neckline row is complete. Now for the neckline portion, it's going to be back loop half double, back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases, working our way across our chest until we reach the other side of the base of our neck. We do want to make sure that we're stretching this piece as if we're wearing it, but I'll meet you back on the other side of the base of our neck right after a half double crochet row, so along the top, then we can do our shoulder together from there. We are back. My neckline is complete. I now have a total of 29 rows. This width is just about 6.5 inches or 16 centimeters unstretched. Since we all ended along the top, what we're going to do from here is make a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started on our neckline. So for those of you that have my numbers, I skipped 10 stitches, so I'm going to make a chain 10. Then from here, we're going to do the same shoulder portion that we did over here. So our following row is going to be our back loop slip stitch row. Following row is a back loop half double crochet row with no increases and no decreases. Then I'll meet you guys back once we have the same amount of shoulder rows as our first shoulder portion here. Then we can finish up with our underarm together. So we are back. My second shoulder is completed. Now we're going to get started on the underarm. Just to let y'all know though, my width is just about 8 inches or 20 centimeters unstretched. Now to get started on the first section of our underarm, we're going to start by inserting our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led up to our shoulder. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain 20. So along this side, from the top, I inserted my stitch marker into the 20th stitch. Now from here, we're going to be putting one back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving 3 stitches right before our stitch marker. We've made our way up with our back loop half double crochets, leaving 3 stitches right before our stitch marker. Now we're going to do our decrease of 3 back loop half doubles because on the other side, we did an increase of 3 back loop half doubles. So starting with the yarn over, we're going to insert our hook into that 3rd to last back loop, yarn over, pull through, into that 2nd to last back loop, pull through, and into that last back loop right before our stitch marker, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 5 of those loops. Now on the other side, we did an increase into the slip stitch row, so for this side, we're going to decrease into the slip stitch row as well. So how we're going to do that is chain 1 and flip. And to do our slip stitch decrease, insert your hook into that first stitch's back loop, pull through, also into that next stitch's back loop. When we have these 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 3, and from here continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So our first 2 underarm rows are complete. From here, we're going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as the other underarm's second section. Now it should be an odd number of rows for everyone, so once we complete this portion, I'll meet you back so we can finish up with the rest of our underarm. So the first underarm portion is complete. I have a total of 9 inches or 23 centimeters unstretched. Now we're going to finish up with our second underarm portion. So what we're going to do from here is back loop slip stitch rows with no increases, no decreases, because we didn't do any on this side. So chain 1, flip our work, 1 back loop slip into every stitch. To get started on the following row, chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half in every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches, and I'll meet you back to do that decrease. So we are back, and our slip stitch row with no increases, no decreases is complete, and we also made our way up with our back loop halves, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now we're going to do a decrease of 2 back loop halves together, so yarn over, into that second to last back loop, pull through, into that last back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4. From here, we're just going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as our first underarm portion. And then once we do a chain up of 1 and cut. So we are back. We have just completed the entirety of our front panel, and I did do a chain up of 1 and cut. My total width is now roughly 10 inches or 25 centimeters unstretched. Now we're going to do the back panel, but it's going to be done pretty much the same way, minus the neckline. So I'm just going to talk you guys through it. So when it comes to doing the back panel, we're all going to start by making the same chain that we made as the front panel's underarm portion. Then we're going to do the same amount of underarm rows with the same exact type of increases. Then once we have that portion completed, we're going to make the same chain that we made for the front panel that led up to our shoulder. Then we're going to do our back loop slip, back loop half double crochet rows with no increases, no decreases, working our way all the way across for the same amount of rows that we have from the first shoulder row all the way across to our last shoulder row. Then complete the back panel with the same underarm portion that we just completed together, then do a chain up of 1 and cut. Then we can get started on seaming everything together. So we are back. Now that both of our front and back panel are completed, the next thing we're going to do is seam the shoulders. So first things first, we're going to make sure the work is flipped wrong side out, meaning the ribbing that we have for the front and back panel is faced in on each other because we want this seam to be along the inside. Then we're going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And all we're going to do is just 1 single crochet into every side row. So doing this together, finding our first side row, which is a side slip stitch row, we're going to find that top loop, insert within the front panel, find that same top loop within the back panel, and then insert into there with a single crochet. Again, everyone's following side row is a side half double. Find that top loop, insert, find the same top loop within the back panel, insert with just 1 single crochet. Let's do this once more. Next top loop within the front panel, which is a side slip stitch row, find that within the front panel. Same top loop within the back panel, insert with 1 single, then single into the following side rows, which is a side half double within the front, side half double within the back, and single. Continue doing this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. So we are back. We have just completed seaming up the shoulders. Now we're going to seam up the sides. Now for the sides, it is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam. So we're all going to want to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, meaning our ribbing is now along the outside. Then insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to pull our working yarn through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then we're going to do our outside loop slip stitch seam. So finding our first side row within the front panel, insert into that front loop. First side loop within the back panel, insert into that back loop, then yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Again, next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, then yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. From here, we're just going to continue doing this, making our way all the way up. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and repeat on the other side. So we are back. Everything is all seamed up. Now we're going to get started on our mock neck. So first things first, what we're going to do is single crochet along our neckline. So we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then insert our hook into any one of the stitches that we have along our neckline. Then we're going to put 1 single crochet into every stitch. Then when it comes to working into our side rows, 2 single crochets into every side half double, 1 single crochet into every side slip. So from where I've inserted my stitch marker, I have a couple regular stitches to work into, so I'm just going to be putting 1 single crochet into each of those. Then I'll meet you back once we reach our first side rows. So I just made my way down with my single crochets. Now I reached our first side row. My first side row is this side half double crochet row. So all I'm going to do is find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. So there is 1, then into that same top loop with a second single crochet. Now into our following side row, which is a side slip stitch row, we're going to find that top loop and insert with just 1 single. Then again into our following side half double, insert with 2 singles. There's 1. Same top loop with a second. Into our following side row with a single crochet because it's a side slip stitch row. We're going to continue on with this, making our way all the way around. And just to let you guys know, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch. So once when it's completed, try our piece on. If this is a little bit too tight, we do some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, we do some stitches with a tighter grip. So now that our single crochet row is completed, we're going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the mock neck to be. I'd like for it to be just about 1.5 inches or 3 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 8. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off for the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. And from here, we're going to continue on with our slip stitches all the way down our chain. Now that we've put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're going to slip stitch into the base. So in that next available stitch, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and now put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding that last stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert into that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. Again, into that next stitch's back loop, insert, yarn over, pull through everything. We're going to continue on with this, making our way to the end of the row. Once we're at the end of the row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. Then I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. Now that we're at the end of our row 3, we're going to connect it into the base. So finding that next available stitch into the base, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. Doesn't count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and repeat. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows, making our way all the way around. Well, we don't have any more stitches left to work into. I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we are back. We've made our way all the way around with our mock neck. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to seam it together. And this seam is actually going to be done exactly the same way as our side seam. So just to talk you guys through it, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Insert our hook into the corner stitches, then do the same exact outside loop slip stitch seam that we did for the sides. Then once we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut, then we can get started on the waistband. So we are back. Our mock neck is seamed up and we're going to get started on the waistband. Now we're first going to need to do a single crochet row. That's going to be pretty simple. Just 2 single crochets into every side half double and 1 single crochet into every side slip. But we do need to separate our front and back panels though. So what we're going to do is start by making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then along the right side, we're going to insert our hook into the stitch that's nearest to our side seam. Once when our hook is in through our side seam, we're going to chain 1 and we're going to start with 2 single crochets into that first side half double crochet row. Now that chain 1 won't actually count as a stitch, but what we're going to do is find that first side row and insert with 2 single crochets into there. And we want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into our first stitch because that is the stitch that's nearest to our side seam. Then everyone's following side row is a side slip stitch row, so just 1 single crochet is worked into there. And we're going to continue on with this until we're worked into the side row that's right before our following side seam, and I'll meet you back. So we've made our way across with our single crochets and we're worked into the side row that's right before our following side seam. We're going to want to insert our stitch marker into the stitch before and on the other side of our side seam. So into this stitch, I'm going to insert my stitch marker, and also into the first stitch on the other side. I'm going to skip my side row into there with 1 single crochet and insert my stitch marker. We're going to continue on with this, making my way all the way around. Well, we don't have any more stitches left, slip stitch into that chain space. And just as a really quick tip, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch, so when it's completed, try your piece on. If it's a little too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, reduce some stitches with a tighter grip. And also when we make our way all the way around into that last side row right before our first single crochet with our stitch marker, be sure to insert your stitch marker into there as well. Then I'll meet you back. So our single crochet row is complete. All of our stitch markers are in place and it fits nicely. So what we're going to do from here is our waistband. Now for our waistband, it is going to be done exactly the same way as our mock neck. So from where we're at, go ahead and make a chain the length that we'd like for our waistband to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters. So I'm going to make a chain 15, then just do my same exact back loop slip stitch rows with no increases, no decreases, make my way all the way around. Then I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. But just as a really quick tip, for any of the side rows that are worked into our stitch marker stitches, we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the bottom edge of that row, just so that we still know where our side rows are. But make your way all the way around and I'll meet you back. All right, so we made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to seam it. Now the seam is going to be the same seam as the mock neck and the sides, and I've already done mine. So just to talk you guys through it, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. We're going to do our same outside loop slip stitch seam so we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Then from here, we're going to get started on the bottom half. So we're going to do a single crochet row along the bottom of our waistband. So we're going to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up. Insert our hook into any one of the side rows along the bottom of our waistband, and we're just going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side row. So into my first side row, which just so happens to be my stitch marker side row, I'm going to find that top loop and insert with a single crochet, and I want to make sure that I am inserting a stitch marker into the top of that stitch just so that we still know where our side stitches are. Now that that single crochet is completed, finding our next one, inserting our hook into that following top loop with a single, into that following top loop, which is a divot row, single crochet again. We're going to continue on with our single crochets, making our way all the way around, making sure that we are inserting our stitch markers into the top of those stitches, and I'll meet you back. Now the single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch, so when it's completed, try your piece on. If it's too loose, reduce some stitches with a tighter grip, and if it's too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip. And lastly, we should have the same amount of stitches on both sides of our stitch marker. So we are back. We have just completed single crocheting along the entirety of the bottom of our waistband. Now we're going to get started on the length. So right after we have slip stitched into that chain space, we're all going to do a chain up of 1 and cut. Then to get started on the length, we're going to first make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. We're going to take a look at our waistband, making sure that it's faced away from us, the neckline is closest to us, and we're going to insert our hook into our stitch marker stitch along the right that is nearest to the front panel. We're doing it this way because the ribbing that we have isn't reversible for the bottom portion, and once when our hook is in through that stitch marker stitch, we're then going to make a chain the length that we'd like for this bottom portion to be. Now you can make this as long or as short as you like. I'd like for mine to reach roughly mid-thigh, so I'm going to start by making a chain 60, and that's going to be 14 inches or 35 centimeters. Now once we have our chain, we're going to do a half double crochet row all the way down. So block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then yarn over, preparing for a half double. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, insert with a half double crochet, and from here continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain. We've made our way down with our first row. Now from here, we're going to connect it into the base. Now just for this first row, it is going to be connected just a little bit differently. So how we're going to do this is just slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, which should be the stitch right next to our stitch marker stitch. And we want to make sure that we're working towards the front panel because like I said, the ribbing isn't reversible. So into that next stitch, just insert with a slip stitch. Now to work our way up to the following row, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. None of these slip stitches into the base count as a stitch. They're just to connect. Then we're going to flip our work. Now we're going to make our way down with back loop slip stitches. So into that first stitch from our previous row, not worked into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert with a back loop slip stitch, and from here continue with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of this row, we're going to chain 2, flip our work, put one back loop half into every stitch, and I will meet you back at the end of our row 3. We are back. We've made our way all the way down with our row 2 and also back up with our row 3. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So from here on out, how we're going to connect our half double crochet row into the base is we're going to count up the next 2 available stitches. So there's 1, there's 2. Into that second stitch, go ahead and insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then since we're here, we might as well work our way up to the following row, which is another slip stitch row. So how we do that is simply slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. None of those count as a stitch. Flip our work and put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. From here, just continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we are worked into our following stitch marker stitch. Once when we are, do a chain up 1 and cut, then I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have made our way across our front panel with our half double slip, and we are worked into our stitch marker stitch. Now I actually took my stitch marker out, but it was there. Then from here, we're going to repeat everything we did here on the other side. It's going to be done exactly the same way. I just wanted to come back and tell you guys to make sure to insert your hook into that following stitch that we have, which is our following stitch marker stitch, because remember, our half double slips aren't reversible. Then just continue that till we don't have any more stitches left. Then do a chain up 1 and cut. So we are back. The bottom is completed. Now we're going to do our armhole, which is just going to be a single crochet row just to clean it up. So making sure that our work is slipped right side out, we're going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam. Then just to talk you guys through it, we're going to be putting 2 single crochets into every side half double, 1 single crochet into every side slip, and 1 single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way up and over. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, slip stitch into that chain space, do a chain up 1 and cut, then repeat everything we did here on the other side. So we are back. We have just completed single crocheting along our armholes, and now that we have that completed, we are all done. Last thing we have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye.